Hello and welcome to another Thursday, another episode of the Gwentlemen Podcast. As always, I am Dale, joined with Talk
change
Show
our name?
Podcast. We'll eventually get it figured out. How you doing, Swim?
I'm great, Dale. Thanks for asking. How are you, man?
I'm doing pretty well. Like, hopefully my internet actually stays stable this week. That'd be kind of nice.
Usually helps out.
Yeah.
I like how you were all like, oh no, Dale, you can have the intro. And then as soon as he tries to do an intro, you just like freaking tear him to shreds.
It was a quick correction.
I wasn't trying to I was correcting him. Thank you, Dale. Now, yeah, we all correct each other here.
Yeah. Also joined with Jaggeris. How are you doing, Jaggeris?
I'm good as always. And we have a special guest today.
The
one and only JoeSn0w. I want to know the origin story of your name. I was thinking about this today.
The origin of my name. Well, first of all, hi everyone. Thanks for having me on here. Basically, once I decided I wanted to start streaming, I had a few buddies get together. There might have been some drinking involved, and we tried to come up with something catchy, short. I don't know. We were just looking for a streamer name. We settled on JoeSn0w, went with it, and that was really the plan.
So you're not a bastard of Winterfell? Is that what you're trying to tell me? I am
unfortunately not a bastard of Winterfell, yeah. I'm neither a bastard nor from Winterfell, but I do like Game of Thrones, so that's got to count for something, right?
It totally does.
Well, Joe, tell us a little bit more. So you said that you're looking into starting streaming and you need something catchy, and I don't know, like for a short name, first and last name is not the way to go, in my opinion.
Well, they're one syllable each, right?
I guess.
See, maybe the alcohol had a little bit of a playing factor in there. Yeah,
but
could give it a couple more days.
So you said how you got into streaming, but how did you get into Gwent?
So I got into Gwent. I was basically just looking for something to play on my Xbox, in my free leisure time, that sort of deal. And I saw that there was Gwent closed beta out. I actually, it was sort of a pain to procure an access code for it. There was this German website that was giving out beta keys, and me not speaking any form of German, it was a little challenging to navigate the website and get my access code. But yeah, once I turned on the game, I got hooked and never really looked back.
Yeah, I just signed up with like 40 different emails.
But you're telling us you're not German? Oh man, I feel so misled.
I'm a one-language speaker, unfortunately.
Oh, me too, dude. Dale, do you speak another language?
Ich kann ein bisschen Deutsch sprechen, aber ich mache viele Kommentierfehler.
Oh, look at him showing off.
Oh, something just happened there.
What?
Dale was the one running that German website, giving them and he's just like, oh, look at this guy trying to get a key. We'll give him a pity key.
Next time, just come to me. I'll try and help you through it. Not much better than where you were at, but I can read a little bit of it.
I know, I know all the staples.
The staples of what?
German as a language. I can say all the, I mean, I'm not going to repeat some of the words I know here, but yeah, no, I know a few.
I believe you.
So you could survive a vacation in Germany, basically.
I don't know those kinds of words.
Okay, fair enough.
So you managed to get your Twitch key from the German website?
Yep, that's how that happened. I got in pretty much right after Nilfgaard became a faction, so I was a little late to the closed beta. And I got hooked on playing Scoia'tael back then, and that was really it. I've been playing games for pretty much my whole life, particularly card games, and Gwent really just, I just sort of hit it off. I think it's a great game, and now here we are.
So speaking of card games, which ones did you play beforehand, before you got into Gwent?
I played quite a bit. I learned to play poker when I was roughly 5 years old. I started playing Magic the Gathering. I played that for several years, probably started around 9 or 10, something like that. I would describe myself sort of like a hardcore casual at Magic. I never really did anything on the professional level with it. I played the Game of Thrones LCG. That's probably where I had my most success. I won a world championship last year. I played Hearthstone to a pretty reasonable level, but once again, never really took it to the level that I'm trying to take Gwent to on the professional scale.
There's a Game of Thrones card game?
Yeah.
I didn't know about this.
No one knows about it. Not to blast the company, but their advertising department isn't great. The game itself is awesome, though.
So were you called JoeSn0w when you played the Game of Thrones card game?
No, just regular Joe. Just
man.
Joe. I was also a Lannister player too, so it wouldn't really have fit too well.
Oh no, you're one of those people. I don't know what a Lannister player even means, but it clearly can't be good. It's like how you said you're a Scoia'tael player, but like nowadays you're a monster player. You see, you're one of those people again.
Yeah, I kind of flip around. I think I've been gravitating towards monsters more and more as the game goes on, because my general preferred playstyle is sort of mid-rangey, grindy decks, trying to eke out value, that type of deal. The weather affording you the damage over time mechanics, things like that. I don't know. It just sort of spoke to my playstyle.
Yeah, who doesn't like monsters?
Well, these days, a lot.
I mean, I feel like monsters they're less hated than they were, a couple patches ago. Speaking of patches ago, let's talk about your favorite meta, Joe. How do you feel about current meta, and what was your favorite meta? We've had so many.
So how I feel about the current meta, I think it's faction-wise, it's in a pretty reasonable spot. I think that there's some polarizations going on that I'm not a fan of. There's a lot of things that do you have the answer to? If you can't check the yes box, the game sort of ends. And there's cards like Woodland Spirit and Rainfarn, Cantarella that exacerbate the coin toss a lot. But besides that, I think particularly for tournament format, I think the meta is in a reasonably healthy shape. My favorite meta, this is probably going to be unpopular as well.
Oh.
I really like I like the old Scoia'tael control deck versus the breedable, when Neckers were breedable by Monsters Nest.
The end of closed beta.
End of closed beta, yeah. I had a blast. Scoia'tael mirror matches were horrendous, but everything else kind of felt great.
That was like when it was dwarfs, right? Like that was the OG dwarfs.
Yeah, dwarfs were around back then as well.
That was the meta where I had to put a disclaimer in my YouTube videos being like, even if you hate this deck, like, please don't dislike the video just because it's that
Wait, you
deck.
can do that?
Like, I anytime you do like a meta deck that anyone hates, you get a disproportionate number of dislikes compared to the regular videos. So I was like, guys,
I've noticed.
Please, just even if you hate this deck with the burning hot intensity of 1,000 suns, like, don't hit the dislike button unless you really hate me. Then knock yourself out, literally.
Yeah, I think I enjoyed that meta so much. I really like the card Kieran. It's probably my favorite card in any form. The old Kieran, when it was sort of an ambush card advantage tool, and it added to like the whole bamboozle options. And is it Cherubial? Is it Kieran? I don't know. Just the mind games you got to play when playing with Kieran were some of the more interesting, I think.
King of Beggars,
so that's why I really liked it. Yep, that was. Well, yeah, but don't you kind of give away at that point?
King of Beggars into Turville, right. Wait, what am I talking about? Yeah.
I'm an old King of Beggars, fun times. And I've had so many weird pronunciations of Kieran. Like, Kieran is an actual Irish name, spelt like that. And, I think some of the names in Gwent, fair enough, they're not actual words. So you can kind of pronounce them how you like. I think you get, like, Taller and Thaler and that sort of thing, even though in the game he's called Taller, but whatever. Whereas Kieran is an actual name, and like you still hear people say, like, what if I had like Cheerin or something, or Cheers? It was like Cheer something.
I've never heard that.
I've heard some special.
I'm guilty of saying Ciarin for quite some time until my chat kind of had enough of that.
Dude, no way, me too.
You too? Good to hear.
Yeah, no, they really set me straight on that one.
Oh man, Ciarin. I have a friend with that name, so like I think he could tell you all of the weird pronunciations that people have, and it's not even that weird of a Irish name. Like, they have some proper special ones, and I mean, it's nothing on, was it Joachim or Joachim or Joachim or like, whatever the hell that guy, I don't even know what he's called, and at this point I'm too afraid to ask.
See, you went through 4 pronunciations and you didn't even hit the one I use. I call it Joachim. That just goes to show.
There you go, see? Like, I feel like him you can call more or less whatever you like because everyone has something different. So, it's not... Well, I think it actually is an actual name, though. I'm pretty sure it's like a Dutch name or something.
Yeah, I think
so. I can't even be like, it's not even a real name because it totally is. And there's probably a Joachim in the chat right now who's like seething inside. Like, he's just having a slight aneurysm or something.
Oh... All right, well, let's go ahead and get into the talk show proper. So we've had, just recently ended actually the Mahakam Ale Festival, and how did it go to everyone's opinion? Like, for me personally, I really enjoyed it. It was a really cool glimpse at how the single player campaign might look, especially the what was it, the second one where you're trying to move the fans to your row or whatever with limited number of cards.
Yeah.
That was a ton of fun. It was just like, hey, here's a puzzle, and you're just staring at it for a little bit, and you're like, I think this, and then you're like, oh, nope, not that one.
Yeah, I mean, I was personally really in love with the second one as well. Like, I used to play a lot of those old Yu-Gi-Oh games, and there were always like tons of like these like little puzzle scenarios that you had to solve, and I'm really a fan of that. It's something that a Duelist actually had something like that too. I remember, but it's something that I've kind of missed from a lot of card games, and if they implement like more of that kind of thing in the game, that's great.
Yeah, I think I had a blast playing the entire Mahakam Ale Festival. My favorite challenge was also the second one, because I think, as Dale put it, it was like a puzzle. It's just, how am I going to solve this? This is exactly what I have to work with, and where am I going? I got to use my awesome drinking horn on stream, because, Mahakam Ale Festival, so that was a plus. The content was great. I thought it was really good.
Yeah, I feel like I have nothing bad to say. It was a little bit short, is my only main criticism of it, but then for a 2-week event, I guess, and it's something that they're taking out of the game, it's not going to be huge. Like if Thronebreaker or something was that short, I would be super disappointed. But as a one-off event, I feel like it's like it kind of gave us a flavor of what's to come, which is really nice. And I think it kind of tested the waters for CDPR, and they can kind of see what did people like, what did people not like, and take that moving forward. I'm just wondering, if it's something that they'll bring back next year, or if they're going to redo it, like how they kind of intend to implement these events going forward. Is it going to be, the Mahakam Ale Festival is every 25 years, but, how they're going to implement these sort of events going forward, whether they're going to bring it back as it is, if they're going to, change it each year, like kind of what they're doing. Because it kind of seems a little bit like if it's gone forever, that's a lot of work that only a fraction of players saw, but then on the flip side, people really like exclusives, and that can kind of entice people into playing, which is kind of CDPR's objective. Yeah,
I mean, I was just gonna say, just like you're saying, it feels short. Like it's almost a memory at this point, right? Like, of course, the event just ended. What was it, yesterday?
I think so.
Yeah, but I mean, even so, pretty much all the members of the dedicated community finished it in the first couple of days, right? Like, and it almost just feels like a memory, because it was just like one day for me.
Yeah, I would agree. I went through it pretty quickly, pretty much as soon as it came out. Sorry, you can go.
No, you go ahead.
It just it didn't really have any replayability to it. So once you sort of got through it, you just felt like it was over. It was really cool while it lasted, but I didn't see a lot of replayability there.
Yeah.
The thing you need to be aware of is, like, Dale he's the most polite, so he's the one that gets to speak the least. Like,
okay.
I don't want to be talking over anybody. Like, if you have something to say, like, I want to hear it. Like, I'm it's not even that I'm most polite. It's like I'm like the most, like, I want to hear what you guys have to say about things.
So least
self-centered. Like, most selfish.
But no, I was going to bring up with the Mahakam Ale Festival is even if we do see it again, what I'm curious is if we're going to see the same rewards again. Because as you mentioned, Jaggers, people like exclusives where it's like, yes, I was here for this time. Like, we look at the closed beta rewards. No one's going to get those anymore, but they're still in the game. It's stuff that, people have and people can't get anymore. And, there's definitely a subset of players that are just like, yes, this is mine. No one else can have this, and I can show it off to people. So even if we do see the Mahakam Ale Festival again, I'm curious if they're going to bring back the exact same rewards, or we'll see maybe a different Mahakam Ale Festival. Personally, what I would love to see is, like, maybe next year we see the same thing, but we get an extra 3 challenges. So, like, the 3 ones that we had, and then another 3, so that we keep expanding to this. But I don't know, maybe that's asking too much.
So have the same 6 events, and then have another 3 harder ones on the same themes, or expand it from there? Like, what do you mean by, like, in terms of that?
So keep the content that was already there. So we have the 3 normal mode, 3 hard mode, and then add 3 more normal mode and 3 more hard mode. Totally new challenges.
But then how does that work with rewards? Because obviously we got a bunch of dust, which was the best part of this event, because I got all of the premiums now. It's great. But that wasn't the best part of it. But we got a bunch of rewards. So then if you bring back the same event, like, if people have already unlocked the rewards, do they unlock them again? Like, how? I guess I'm just wondering how that would work?
Oh, I would say, yeah, you unlock them rewards again, but not the avatar, the title, the border. Maybe have new ones for it. Like it's the second time around. Maybe it's a silver cup this time or something, or tankard or whatever the thing is.
What about you guys? What do you think?
No, it's honestly an interesting idea. Like I'm trying to think. Do games do that? Like I'm trying to think of a scenario where I've seen a game do that, and I'm coming up blank. Does anybody have any examples of that?
I mean, what did Overwatch do this year? Because they had a Halloween event last year that I guess they brought back. I don't know. I haven't played Overwatch in a while, but they brought back the event and added more skins, I guess is the kind of way they did it. So I don't know. I don't know how it would work. I think it's, a difficult question to answer. Yeah, any thoughts, Joe?
My guess is it would probably be slightly different. I would have a hard time believing that they would just rerun the same event again. I think a really elegant solution would be something like Dale said, to bring back the old content and then add some more content to it. I would be very, very surprised if a year from now, Mahakam Ale Festival time again, and they just go ahead and do the same sort of, the same challenges and stuff. That would surprise me. As to where they actually go with it, I don't really know.
Will they wait, a year or 25 or 24?
Yeah, 24 and change, right?
I guess the thing is, it would also mean that because the team they've got the resources to be making this content on a regular basis. Like they've said they're going to have a Halloween event, and we'll probably expect to see a Christmas event. Yeah. So I don't see them just recycling it, because like they have the team working on it now. So once the team's done a full year of events, they're not just going to stop making things. That seems a bit silly. So I reckon they'll do something different. I think like that's where they'll go with it. I think they want these kind of events maybe to be like one-offs, and like, if you miss out, you miss out. And it then encourages people to play during events, which keeps people playing regularly, which keeps people, involved in the current meta and keeps players hooked, basically.
Yeah. I agree with you. My thing is, like, if we're going to have any part of this event be exclusive, I'd like it to just be, the cosmetic stuff, the avatar, the border, the title. Like, keep that as a nice little, hey, you played it this time and you get something out of it, because we already have precedent for that. We already have the closed beta equivalent, and the season stuff too. But for what I don't want to see lost is that content, because it was solid content. It was fun to play. It was a little short, but it was something that I don't want to have some going forward in Gwent's history, where it's like, hey, we had content as an exclusive one-off thing and no one else gets to touch that content again, because that just doesn't seem as much fun for the rest of the community if you're coming in later and it's like, oh, that would have been fun to play and I never get a chance to do it.
Yeah, I kind of agree with Dale, honestly. I mean, maybe there's some factors I'm not considering, but it honestly does seem like just better overall and more fair to new players.
I mean, yeah,
sounds good.
Okay.
No, go.
Yeah, it's sorry about that. It's a little strange that certain people would feel like they missed out. For example, let's say you come in, now it's year 2, year 3, and you're playing another Mahakam Ale Festival, and you're seeing all these, sweet icons. Oh, that looks like it's from the Ale Festival. Where could I possibly get that? And if the content's gone for forever, they don't even get to play through the challenges. Maybe with the I'm probably on the side of leaving the cosmetics as exclusives, but reintroducing the content if they're going to do something like that. Like if this is Mahakam Ale Festival time of the year, and if the Halloween event, there's always a Halloween event every year. I think something like that could work.
Yep.
Sounds good. And how do we feel about, the rewards? We got the ale border, the Odrin icon, and the accomplished drinker title. Do you think people... Well, do you think these are things that you're going to be using consistently? How do you feel about Odrin's voice lines versus, say, some of the other characters' voice lines? I know some people are quite passionate or dispassionate about certain voice lines.
Oh, I am passionate about every single voice line, especially with the addition of Odrin. He just fits right under that system mute all emotes command. So
Dale,
I honestly have no idea what he sounds like.
You don't even know.
I have no idea. As soon as they introduce where it's like, all right, cool, emotes, cool. Oh, it's all just taunting. All right, fine. Can we get a system option to just mute all of them? Oh, we have a system option to mute all of them. I have not heard anything since that has been permanently checked.
For those unaware, Dale doesn't like fun.
I mean, I really like the border and the title. I actually haven't used the Odrin. I'm not a huge emoter myself. But I've been using the border in the title. I think it's pretty sweet. Eventually, probably season end, I'll switch to something new. Just kind of the flavor of the week kind of deal. But I'm still rocking it for right now.
Yeah, I am too. I forgot to take it off.
The border, the icon, title.
The border. I remember to take off the icon.
I mean, I guess you could be one of those hipsters who has like no border. Like, oh, look at me, my no border, my 4,500 MMR. Ho, ho, ho.
That sounds exactly like something I would do.
Just like no border, no title. You go on your like player profile, it's like Geralt. Like, just make yourself look like just as boring as you possibly can, because that's exactly the thing to do. See, I don't really feel like an accomplished drinker myself. Like, I feel like that seems to be like an achievement, and as someone who's not very good at drinking, that's maybe not me. But then, I mean, the other titles that you have, what are there? Like, there's a bunch of exclusive ones. You've got like Grandmaster and Master and all those ones. You've got Pioneer. You could be a pioneer. I don't know. I haven't found a title yet that speaks to me.
See, the way I see it is like you got 3 different ways to show off how long you've been playing the game. So I'm planning on keeping that tankard for a while as my avatar, but or not avatar, the border. And then I've got the Geralt from the closed beta, and then one of the titles from the closed beta. And it's like, all right, cool. I've got one more slot where as soon as we get a Halloween event and there's exclusive title or something there, I switch that out. And it's like, I've been playing this long. I have show it off. But no, I don't know how long I'll actually keep the stuff around. It's cool for sure. I do like the tankard. It's a kind of a neat little border, different from what we've seen with the other ones, where it's like, hey, the other ones are yeah, it's mostly just a square, and this is this is sort of a square, but a lot of extra. But no, it'll be. Well, I think we'll see how long those things stick around after the Halloween event comes out, assuming we get more stuff.
Ooh, Halloween event.
Assuming we get a Halloween event, has it been confirmed? I think it's been hinted at a lot.
It's been winked at, basically. Yeah. I think it's I mean, most people are comfortable assuming there's going to be a Halloween event because Berza wouldn't wink at us like that.
Yeah, he was very heavily oh, there'll be an event sooner than you think. And then we had a discussion about what Halloween in The Witcher would be. So, if they turn around and they're just lol bamboozled, I think be a little bit upset. And it's it was a trapper all along,
It's always a trapper.
It kind of, sometimes it is. That's the worst part. I'm just
I know.
Who thinks that this is wise? I have no idea.
So anyway, if there is going to be a Halloween event, then that means we're getting one pretty soon. That would probably be in the next couple of weeks, right?
Yeah, probably around the time of the end of season is when I reckon they would do it. Start it at Halloween rather than have it end for Halloween, or whatever the equivalent is in the Witcher universe. It's got some special name. This isn't Oktoberfest; it's Mahakam Ale Festival, for example.
Yeah, exactly.
I imagine you want to start.
Go ahead.
I imagine you'd want to start a little bit before Halloween, right? When everyone's still in full swing Halloween mode, everyone's going out and getting their decorations and all of that. Which it seems a little weird on the timing, but I imagine if you were going to do an event, you'd want to start a couple of days beforehand, right?
Yeah, I think just before Halloween, and then have it run for 2 weeks from there. I don't think they'll do it where the 2 weeks ends on Halloween, and I don't think they'll do it maybe a week before Halloween and a week after. But because we have the end of season and we have the new cards coming in, it kind of makes sense to me to coincide it with that.
Yeah, that's where I was thinking it'd be a little odd. It's going to be odd timing if they try and fit in a Halloween event, because as JoeSn0w said, you kind of want to start it sooner rather than later while everyone's still feeling the Halloween spirit. But we're nearing end of season, so it's going to be an odd, I guess, what are players incentivized to do? Because if you come out with content right towards the end of season, people will be like, do I do the new content, or do I try and up my rank on the leaderboard and maybe miss out on all this exclusive festival or Halloween or whatever we want to whatever we end up getting. So it's going to be very interesting to see when we actually get our next event in comparison to the end of season.
Somebody in chat is saying that the next 2 events were data mined and information is public. There's one with Toussaint with spooky vampires, apparently. And that's purportedly the Halloween one.
spooky vampires, because regular vampires are not spooky at all.
No, they're.
I feel like, especially post 2000s, spooky vampires just makes me think like older vampires as opposed to the modern sparkly crap.
As opposed to sexy vampires.
Kind.
Oh man, because I think sexy vampires would go down so well with the Gwent community. That's definitely something that they could get. Like Bess can become a vampire. We can make some kind of weird storyline there.
No, Regis kind of has it going on.
Oh, Regis, her vampire, or which one? Both is the correct answer. Anyway.
So speaking of, our future stuff coming out soon-ish, so we did get confirmed we're getting 21 cards in this next update, whenever that ends up being. And it's going to be 4 cards for each faction, and Skellige gets that extra one, because Skellige apparently didn't get enough loving.
Yeah,
okay.
And Jaggerus was guessing it was going to be a clear row weather card.
Yeah, that's what I think it'll be.
Pretty good guess. Makes sense.
I mean, it seems to fit, right? Because you have the Armor Smith sort of filling that role for right now, and every other faction has one. I don't know if they originally intended the Armor Smith to just do that role, and maybe because Skellige is a little bit unique, that's just the way they solve weather, I guess. But I've definitely seen some outcry about Skellige not having an outright, weather clear for single row. So I would imagine, I think that's a pretty good guess.
It's interesting because we're actually seeing the Armor Smith getting played quite a lot this patch in terms of the current meta, because people are playing weather and stuff, and you can then just wait and let the weather tick and then repair 2 units. And because weather doesn't really hit multiple units, it typically hits single units. If people are playing fog, which is very common, because it hits the highest unit, the Armor Smith is really seeing value. Whereas if they're playing frost or drought or something, which hits lower units, that's where he doesn't see his value, and that's, I guess, the place where a single rogue clear would shine.
Yeah, I think the Armor Smith is actually quite good now. It's the weather, as you were speaking to, and you also have a lot of drowners and whale harpooners running around. And particularly the whale harpooners are really good at injuring it. You're almost incentivized to injure a unit almost to its death if you have more harpooners, so you can build a bigger row, maintain last rate value, that type of thing. So you're having a lot of 1 and 2 strength units, and I think that's where the Armor Smith's really coming in. It's been very good lately.
Yeah, I mean, one of the interesting things about this addition of new cards is that, I mean, it's the end of the month, right? Which means it's presumably coinciding with some kind of Halloween event. So we may be in for a really huge amount of content in the span of a week or 2 even.
Yeah, particularly if you're trying to spend your time between the pro ladder and the standard ladder already. If you're trying to get, top 100 on the regular ladder and keep a pro ladder thing going on, if some new content comes out at that point, you could certainly find yourself a little overloaded there.
Yeah.
I think for sure. I think it's a lot of games, 400 games on the pro ladder just to get placed. And then obviously if you're being competitive with the tournaments that we've had, such as GwentSlam, for example, where your pro ladder ranking, is taken into account. I think it's a difficult one to decide how to split your time with the regular ladder and with the pro ladder. I haven't played any pro ladder, and I've basically been doing regular ladder, just because I like that actually gives that gives actual rewards, whereas pro ladder, because I'm not trying to be top 1, top 2, top 3, I'm less incentivized to play it, although I do still want to play it so they don't kick me out. That would be nice. I mean, unless they said that you need 400-500 MMR to get up upgraded into the pro ladder, and if you're bottom 10% after playing 10 games, so anyone who's inactive gets kicked out. And then from there, the bottom 10% gets kicked out, I believe. Yeah. So you need to be top 90% active players. And so I'm wondering, will they kick me out and then put me back in, or will they put people in and then kick me out? I'm just wondering, will my 400-500, if I get 400-500 MMR, do they keep me, or do I still need to get top 90%? This is where I'm concerned.
Yeah.
I don't know if you.
I'm sure they'll keep you if you get 45. They have to, right?
I better. Otherwise, I'll have to have words with Berger and be like, what is this nonsense?
I mean, because if you're meeting the qualification for falling out of pro ladder, but also meeting the qualification for re-entering it, I'd imagine they keep you. I hope they have a plan for that kind of situation, because you're not going to be the only person falling into that basket. For me personally, I was on the other side of it. I put almost all of my Gwent time into the pro ladder and very little time into the regular ladder. But I've noticed that a majority of people I've talked to are really choosing where to spend their time rather than a little bit here and a little bit there.
I mean, that makes sense just because pro ladder takes so many games that to really compete in it, you just kind of have to stop caring about normal ladder to a degree at that point.
Yeah, I agree. It's definitely a large time investment.
And of course, on the other end, anybody who doesn't really interested in pro ladder is just gonna completely ignore it. Just ignore that one. I had a word in my throat.
Yeah, Jaggers has me scared now because you all got me scared. Because I was like, yeah, I've been in the same boat. I haven't played Pro Ladder yet. I've intended to. I just haven't gotten into it. And it's like, all right, I need to get 400 games in. We need to start playing that. But now I'm just like, wait a second. If I don't get those games in, if I get low, and then I meet the ranked ladder requirement, then no.
Well, you have about
too many things to think about.
16 days to get 400 games, which means you currently need to be playing 25 Pro Ladder games a day, roughly.
Yeah,
if you want to get to. I mean, if you want to be top 90%. Then I don't think you need to play 400 games. You probably only need to play, 30, 40, 50. But if you want to see where you're placed, then you go play 400 games, which is 25 a day. You should probably start sooner rather than later if you're going down that road.
I was just going to do 100 a day and wait till the fourth to last day.
You don't need sleep.
No, you don't need to.
Yeah, sleep is for the weak.
Yeah, I definitely think when you're talking about getting started on the pro ladder, it can be intimidating to look at all those zeros across the board. You just kind of have to, I don't know, I made the decision at the beginning of the season, but once you decide you're going to go, you just got to start plugging away at it. I don't know, have you been playing the pro ladder a lot or pretty much just the regular ladder? I'm curious if you're going
I started playing pro ladder, but I just kind of dropped off. I decided it wasn't really worth it.
Just not worth it for you?
Yep.
I'm curious as to whether most people are playing their 100 games with the faction, kind of get better and better with the faction, and then move to a different faction, or people are just splitting it up. I've been playing 100 at a time, but...
I think from all the people I've talked to, that seems to be the most common way, yeah.
I think it makes the most sense, because as with regular ranked, I feel like in Gwent, if you play a deck consistently, you get better at it, right? That's just kind of how it works, because you get used to the different matchups, you get used to the synergies with the cards, and ultimately you'll play at a better level. But I find, whenever I change deck, I'm like, right, what the hell is in this deck again? what have I actually tried to do here? And then you switch deck and you're like, I have no idea what I'm even gonna but what's going on with this deck, but we'll figure it out and hopefully it'll be fine. So I think if you're someone who switches decks a lot, then you're going to have a hard time.
Yeah, for sure. Well, going back to future content, so the other thing that we haven't touched on yet is that Thronebreaker is coming out, I think they said early 2018, if I'm not mistaken.
Did they? No. They said late 2017.
I thought it was this year.
Yeah, it said this year. So, I mean, people are speculating December because people are pessimists, and kind of rightly so.
I don't know, I hear video game release times, and I'm just like, add 6 months.
It'll get pushed back. This I hope it's December. I hope it's this year. If it's not this year and it's early next year, I'm okay with that. I don't know, we have a bunch of content. We have new cards coming. We've got these, special events that they've started doing with the Ale Festival and that. I'm not concerned about Gwent content particularly.
Yeah, as long as the new cards keep flowing, I think that's the most important thing. And then, there's no reason to rush something like Thronebreaker. It's better if we wait an extra month or two to get a higher quality product once it's done. something they feel really comfortable that this is the best they can hit, and just release it that way. Just keep the new cards coming. Keep everything fresh.
Yeah, I mean, they have dumped a really, really immense amount of time into this project. They are treating this single player campaign Thronebreaker it's such a big deal compared to single players and other card games, which are really side projects. This is really it's half the game, and I think it'll show. I hope it will.
I think it's what CDPR does well. They've always had strong single player content. If you look at Witcher and stuff, that's what they do well is storytelling and that side of things. So I think this is a good opportunity for them to showcase how they're different from other games, and I think it's definitely something that could entice a lot of new players in. So, and it's something you only get one shot at, right? Like you only get one first single player experience. So you may as well, go ham.
Yeah, I mentioned I'm pessimistic where I just added the 6 months, but it's something that, depending on the studio who's doing it, and CDPR is one of the studios that I rate very highly, it's like, if you need to take the time to get the quality product out, take the time. Especially for something as big as Thronebreaker, where it's going to be, I think they've already said it's 8+ hours of content. Like, it's a full single-player game. And it's not something that you want to be like, hey, here's our first foray into doing this with Gwent, and then it just feels rushed. Like, first impressions are just too important. And I think for something like that, if it comes out late, it's better than coming out rushed.
I agree. You only get one chance to make a first impression, and I think that's the approach they're taking. I mean, they're very clearly great at storytelling. That's what drew me into the Witcher world. I started late with Witcher 3, but I mean, I couldn't count how many hours I dumped into that game. It was awesome. It was, it was just a great experience. So if it's anything along that line, I'm sure it's going to be great.
Well, shifting gears again, so we talked about it a little bit before, but we made maybe a couple of jokes about it before too. But how are we feeling about the current meta for right now?
The current meta.
Skellige getting that extra card that they desperately need.
If you'll ask Reddit, and Reddit, no, I'm kind of siding with Reddit on this one. I mean, the thing people are talking about, I mean, it's kind of boiling down to two things, those being Woodland Spirit and Restore, or like maybe the rest of the entirety of the Skellige deck. I don't know. And some people boil it down to different things. Like some people say, hey, it's Harpies, not Woodland Spirit. Some people say, it's Doragre and Restore. But I mean, realistically, it's just kind of those interactions coming together. It's just not great right now. I don't know. I'm trying to make new stuff work still every day, and I don't know why I'm still trying.
I feel like it's really interesting. Like, the thing that blows my mind the most about the Restore change is that it was actually big enough for actually two things. One, that it was as big of a deal as it ended up being for Skellige, and two, that it was actually enough. It was so big of a deal that Skellige was like, move aside other excellent silvers. I want to run these guys now. Like, Skellige has always been the faction in my mind where I'm just like, all right, I've got like 6 silvers and I want to run 12. And so finally got enough where it's just like, okay, we can just shove these out of the way and get Restore. But then Woodland Spirit, also known as the card that is Monsters. It's like, Monsters is still a good faction. We have this card. Like, it's so interesting to see, as somebody who's been playing since, closed beta and watching Monsters go throughout multiple patches and always finding something that holds them together. And this patch is just Monsters taken along. But I agree with the Restore change is... I'm really hesitant to say that it's bad for the overall meta. I think it feels like it's interesting still to me. So maybe I just haven't seen enough of it to get completely sick of it. But I'm more of cool, this is now a viable way of playing the game. How does everything else adapt to it? And I just feel like we haven't seen that yet. I feel like we haven't gotten the next Swim dwarf deck to come out of nowhere and just be like, hey, you're doing this, I'm doing all this.
I'm trying.
He was playing Siri Dash. He's doing his best, okay?
I really am trying. I just want, you know what? I just want there to be a third deck in this meta. I don't know.
How do you feel, Joe?
I feel like it's pretty hard to innovate right now, and I sort of sympathize with Swim on that, because when you're trying to build a new deck, there's so many things you have to be prepared to deal with. You have to be able to beat insane tempo boosts, just coming out of nowhere with basically no setup. And you have to be able to deal with a large, significant carryover force that has a ton of value plays. So trying to find a deck that is capable of being strong on its own while having some sort of way to mitigate these big factors, it's not easy to do right now. It's potentially tough, and some of the plays, particularly Woodland Spirit, exacerbate the coin toss to such a level where it just... you almost feel hopeless in round one. If you lose the coin toss against Woodland Spirit, it's like, what do I do from here?
I think that's fair to say. I feel like the problem with Woodland Spirit isn't necessarily with Woodland Spirit. It's with the fact that Woodland Spirit then draws, Roach and a couple of Harpies and stuff. And that's the issue is maybe in Harpies rather than in Woodland Spirit. And I guess the issue with CDPR, like they tried so hard to fix Harpies, and in doing so, they created this monster.
What do you think if the dogs spawned by Woodland Spirit didn't have the beast tag? Maybe they were plants or something, or roots, so they wouldn't proc Harpies? Do you think that's enough?
Oh, look at this wolf. It's totally a plant. I guess you're suggesting like so that they're not wolves, not like
they're not wolves. They're not
them
beasts.
plants.
Sure, there's some other sort of token, right? When you fight Woodland Spirits in the game, doesn't he like attack you with roots and all sorts of other nonsense? And there's more than just wolves in the woods, right? Like he's the spirit of the woods. I think maybe something like that would be a starting point.
Just to mitigate his potential. I mean, because Woodland Spirit still got played in previous metas. You still saw it get played. I mean, not to the extent that people were running Renew so they could play it twice, but it definitely still got played in previous versions of the meta. But that was also when Foglets, when you could have like multiple Foglets rather than just the one Foglet that we have now. Which gave it a little bit more tempo because you get 6 points instead of 4 and stuff. So I don't really know. I don't know how you change it. I think you have to look at either you change the beast tags and leave Harpies as they are, or you change Harpies in some ways. Like I think do Harpies cause themselves to tick?
Yes, they do.
So, yeah, they do.
Yeah,
but like
so
that's
they're
the kind of
beasts
change.
themselves.
So you only need 7 beasts to get the 3 Harpies out.
So that's the kind of change you could make. You could make it so that Harpies don't tick themselves, and that would reduce kind of potential tempo in that sort of deck a little bit.
I wonder how much just fixing Harpies bugs would help to resolve, help nerf the deck a little bit. Because I've had a couple of times now where I'll have a Harpy come out, or I think it's something to do with in between rounds where certain Harpies counters will tick, and then if it didn't get pulled, the round ends and another one
It's
starts.
Necker Warriors, man. You're
that
playing Necker Warriors, right? So
Oh, yeah.
Necker Warriors are bugged so basically at any given point there's one Harpy that's counting down and it's chosen randomly and it counts down. But when you use Necker Warriors on a Harpy, for some reason it disrupts that. It says, hey, one of the Necker Warrior Harpies at the bottom of your deck, I'm going to start counting you down.
It's the same count, yeah.
Yeah. and then after that it counts the second one that the Necker Warrior pulls, and only then does it go back to the one that it kind of should have been the entire time.
So then you get interactions where you can pull a lot more Harpies than you should.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It can be an upside and a downside.
You'll see it being played and multiple Harpies coming out in rapid succession. And I've only seen that after the Necker Warrior. Do you know if it counts the lowest tick that's going on, or it just starts the tick differently? I'm a little unfamiliar with exactly how that's currently working.
I don't know if it's coded to count the lowest. It's not counting the lowest tick. I think it's two different things. It's choosing one. If it ticks and all of your deck is all 3 tick Harpies, it chooses one randomly, and then it'll tick that one until it comes out, and then it'll just kind of rinse and repeat from there.
Okay.
The thing with Gwent is monsters, they just find a way. I can't remember a time when monsters have been trash. It's
been
well,
halfway through closed beta, back in December. They were kind of bad in December.
So they've had a year. 2017 is the year of the monsters, apparently.
Hey, and it's almost over. Look at that. 1.5 more months.
So we just have to wait till January, and then we'll see some heavy monsters nerfs.
Yeah.
I mean, it feels like...
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
It feels like they've tried to nerf some of those strategies in particular. I mean, look at how ridiculously powerful Dagon used to be with all his additional options. They've tried tuning his points down. They've made a ton of changes to monster cards. And like you guys said, they just always sort of find a way. I think it's something just about how the faction operates. Granted, Woodland Spirit's been a part of the large majority of these decks, but they always do seem to come through, even when they're perceived dead or this patch is going to kill them, and they always come out just fine.
Yeah, I mean, I think it just boils down to cards from deck. plus carryover. Like if you look through every single monsters in the past, I mean, like think closed beta, it was all about carryover, right? Monsters even had the faction passive that was carryover, and that was super good. So, and then it comes into open beta, cards from deck. You've got Foglets, you've got Neckers, which are both cards from deck and carryover. You've got Harpies, you've got the old Harpies, which were attached from Kalana Harpy, which is carryover. I mean, it's pretty much just one or the other or both combined, and those are things that are deceptively very powerful. But at the same time, they're just kind of two themes that monsters have, right? Like they're designed around those two concepts, and it's just so strong.
I mean, the one thing about Woodland Spirit is it's not very good against, what's that Square Tail card, like Hawk or something, where it gets buffs for every unit that you play.
Smuggler, right?
Hawk or Smuggler. And I've been seeing like a few people running that a bit more, because then, you know, you play the Foglet, Roach, the Woodland Spirit itself, plus 3 units, so then they're gaining 6 points, even though, like, to counteract your tempo a little bit. But then on the flip side, you're then putting Fog on the Hawker Smuggler, which then kind of negates its tick. So it's not really a great counter, but I have seen that cropping up a little bit. I don't know if you guys have seen much of it.
Yeah, they're not bad. They actually do pretty okay, for sure.
The thing is, that's only really good against, you know, swarm decks, where you're spawning 8 million units. So it's good in that situation, but how good is it out with that?
Are we seeing a situation where you're not getting swarmed by 1 million units?
I haven't played enough Hawker Smuggler recently to tell you how it would function outside of the Swarm matchup. I saw Swim playing it earlier. Maybe he has some more to say about it. But, I mean, it seems like it's good against the Swarm decks. Whether it's enough, I don't know. But it seems like it's good there. The question is the power you're gaining there worth, you know, all of the other factions on the ladder that you're going to be playing against? How bad is the card there?
It honestly feels fun. Like the biggest vulnerability is that it's killable, but it's okay. I mean, it's just then you kind of have to reconcile that with the fact that you're playing Squirtle. I don't know. Like Hawker Smuggler would be a good card in a different faction.
I don't know. You're thinking maybe a little bit too hard on Squirtle, because I feel like Squirtle is actually doing decent. Maybe it's getting overshadowed by a couple of other core decks in the meta right now, but it's got, you know, about 3 really cool different ways of playing the faction. I mean, you've got movement, Spell-a-Tell. I think I've seen a little bit of trying to get some hand buffing going on again, which hasn't really been a thing until recently.
Yeah, Pumpkin's new Bamboozle deck.
And then occasionally I just see like Francesca Mulligan Hybrid, God knows what the hell they're trying to do decks. I mean, that's my favorite one to play against.
I was playing that earlier today.
No, that's its official name, the Francesca Hybrid, God knows what you're trying to do.
And that's how I feel when I'm playing against them.
Honestly, I didn't really know what I was trying to do either.
Yeah, I tend to get that impression. I don't know, I think Squirtle's okay. Like, you can tech Squirtle against stuff like Swarm to an extent, and to Skellige. Like, I feel like it's okay. You know, you can run Tremors, for example, and that's really fun with Elven Merc, because then even if they don't have any ones, you can use it to kill your Elven Merc, and then you get the little 6 strength dude. So you typically can see value with it, and then with Ithleen, you can double play it, so it's okay there, and then you only have to put 1 in your deck, and that gives you a little bit of counter. Whereas in the Skellige matchup, you know, I think you have some options, maybe with trying stuff like Weather, or people are running Manticore Venom, for example, to kill units so that then they can't be repaired by the Smuggler. And people are running Drought, because Drought typically does better against Skellige. So I don't feel like Squirtle, at least their spell decks, are completely terrible.
I mean, I wouldn't say they're completely terrible. I think part of the problem you run into, though, is the spell deck is, at its core, a very control-y deck, right? You want to neutralize your opponent's threats on the board and kill them with your small amount but largely powerful threats. And the way you approach teching against the monster matchup and the way you approach teching against the Skellige matchup are so wildly different that preparing your deck to deal with both is not an easy task. And even if you have everything in there, it's, did I draw the right half of my deck? There's not a ton of cards that are great in both matchups, is sort of the thing. They attack the metagame in very different ways, and when you're trying to build a control deck, trying to manage all of that at once can sort of be overwhelming.
Honestly, I couldn't have put it better myself.
I can't remember the last time that we've had a situation where there were two different really popular meta decks, and if you tried to tech against one, you couldn't tech well against the other. That's never happened before, I don't think.
It's good that you're saying that. I wanted to bring that up. Like that's what I was gonna say. I feel like that's a problem that Gwent is kind of. I don't know if they're ever going to be able to overcome it, but I mean, pretty much every meta, when you leave it alone long enough, like when it's been long enough from a patch, the vast majority of metas we've seen kind of devolve into like two decks that basically act as like gatekeepers, right? Like they actually feed off of each other. It's symbiotic, and it's kind of disgusting because they both empower the other to not have to deal with other like new decks coming on the scene. And it's, I don't know. I mean, how do you guys agree? Is that a problem? And like, if so, how would CDPR even go about fixing that?
I mean, go take it away, Joe.
I was gonna say I completely agree, and I really like the way you worded it as gatekeepers, because it's sort of just keeping other decks out of the format. Yeah. I don't necessarily know that there is a great answer for it. Maybe just continuing to release new cards on a steady basis. You know, the meta takes time, it develops, it settles. These are the best decks for a while. New cards come in, boom, kind of keep it fresh. I don't know that there's, a 100% perfect answer. Card games are incredibly difficult to balance. And when you're looking at 5 different factions, tons of new cards, constant influxes, I mean, having all 5 factions on a perfectly level playing field, it almost seems like the impossible task.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, it seems to even be almost a flaw of Gwent's format, because different decks in Gwent are basically all about just how you distribute strength in different ways, right? Tall versus wide, different rounds, distributing in carryover, distributing in hand. Like, it's just distribution of strength. That's the entire game. And I feel like there's pretty much always just going to be 2 decks that distribute strength differently, and they kind of do it in a way. They kind of form this partnership, and they just force everything else out of the meta. I don't know, Jaggers, what do you think?
So I guess you're saying that the issue is that the 2 meta decks are polar opposites, and so
yeah.
You can't really tech against them. And I guess the only way you then deal with that is that you do your own strategy and completely ignore what they're doing, more or less, which I guess in some ways Nilfgaard sort of does, because they spend their whole time buffing themselves. I mean, admittedly, they do have damage and they do have removal, so it's not completely independent. But the alternative is you do your own thing. But then you lead to a situation that we had with the dwarfs, which everyone freaking hates. Play a dwarf, buff a dwarf those days.
Which wasn't really hates that.
Okay, like normal people. So that's a difficult one, and I feel like it's this sort of situation where you have at least two like viable decks is better than a situation where you have one deck that crushes literally everything else. But then I guess the argument is you don't really get that situation, because if you have one deck that's really good, people can just attack against it, and then that allows like a rock paper scissors mentality. And the problem with the meta at the moment is we don't really have that. You just have you have the 2. I don't know. I think it's a difficult one. I mean, Joe brought up the topic of hot fixes and kind of dealing with that. And I think this season we've had a good number of hot fixes. Like, I felt like the hot fixes that we've had have allowed the meta to adjust throughout the 2-month season, and that stopped things from getting stale compared to if they just, left it or just had the one hot fix. I think that's where the game starts to become maybe more boring if you're someone who plays it more regularly, is when they don't do that. But I don't know. I don't know what the best way is to kind of deal with these situations. But I guess the thing is, it's not going to last forever, right? We're going to get new cards in a couple weeks, and then we'll move on to whatever meta that brings. The Hattori meta.
Can't wait. Hattori meta.
Dumpling meta. But no, it's the second time that we found ourselves in the situation where we're in a meta that, there's 2 main decks in the meta, and then everybody else is just trying to figure out how they fit in compared to these. And I think it's going to get solved the same way it got solved the last time, which is new cards, new patch, new changes. But the question becomes, how do we not find ourselves in this situation again? And at least for me, I'm still holding out hope that it's something that will just happen organically over time. As we get new cards, as we get new archetypes into the game, we'll find ourselves less and less in these situations where it's just 2 decks. We might find ourselves in situations where it's 3 or maybe 4, and maybe that's just a fault of the gameplay of Gwent in itself, is that it leads to these types of things, and maybe it's something that'll never get solved. But it's something that I'm hoping that, we've seen it once. we're seeing it again, and we're getting more cards, more card changes, and it's been a little bit since we were in that meta. I think it was a closed beta actually when we had it last. So we've had a good few months of open beta before we had this same issue.
It kind of depends on the degree you're talking about. That was when it was at its worst, though, for sure.
Yes, and it's gotten it's definitely better since then. So it's something that I'm just hoping will continue to organically get better over time.
One point I'd like to bring up also is, this is all speaking about the ladder, right? When you're playing in a tournament setting, a lot of that sort of goes away. If I know that I can ban one particular faction, I can then tune my other decks to be good against the other faction. Do you guys agree? Do you think this is mostly a ladder issue, or do you think it's going to pervade into tournament play as well?
No, absolutely. It's a ladder issue for sure.
I think that's fair to say. I think like ladder and tournaments suffer from different issues. Like in ladder, the issue is this kind of situation. In tournaments, the issue is the coin flip. So like in ladder, that's less of an issue because you play so many games that it should more or less even out, and that if you're a good player, you'll be able to climb. Whereas in tournaments, I think it can be relatively crippling. But that's that's a whole other kettle of fish that I think we've probably talked about to death in the Gwent community in general has kind of talked about it and come up with solutions, and it's not worth going into.
That has to be the single most persistent topic throughout Gwent's history. I mean, I remember people talking about it on month 1 of Gwent.
But the thing is, I think it's fair to say that, there's 2 strong decks, but you still see a whole mix of things on ladder. I mean, maybe, quite high up for 300 plus, it gets worse. I'm 4-2-10 at the moment, I think. And I still see, a lot of things. I think I saw only 1 Skellige yesterday, but I did... but I did see about 5 monsters. But then monsters, it wasn't just Swarm. Someone was playing that Consume Dagon. I saw some Eridans. I don't think it's necessarily that bad. It's maybe worse. I think it's maybe exacerbated in the pro ladder and in high MMR ranked.
The pro ladder also has the incentive to, it sort of forces you into playing various factions if you're intending on getting all of your games in. So I've noticed there's almost an artificial diversity in the pro ladder, whereas compared to the regular rank ladder, granted, I haven't played a ton of regular ranked ladder this season, but what I have played, it definitely seemed that that the pro ladder's been more diverse just because of that.
Yeah, I mean, we could talk about Nilfgaard a little bit. We haven't really touched on them. I think Nilfgaard can be strong, but because they're a bit more RNG dependent, they can kind of shoot themselves in the foot.
Yeah, I mean, my problem with Nilfgaard is kind of always my problem with Nilfgaard, which is that it just doesn't feel like you can really deck build uniquely for them, right? I can look at Squirtel, I can look at all their tools, look at how those tools are distributed amongst slots and among cards, and I can say confidently, I think there exists some Squirtel deck that is better than how people are playing the faction right now. There's so many possibilities and options and combinations. Whereas with Nilfgaard, it's just the same problem. I mean, it just feels like you can't really bring unique stuff for the table for Nilfgaard because their most powerful cards just kind of build their decks themselves, right?
So your issue is that you can't be a special little swim snowflake.
Well, it's just at this stage in the patch, particularly, you just can't. You can't really improve upon the current Nilfgaard decks, it feels.
A lot of the Nilfgaard cards do come in packages. Once you make the choice to run emissaries, right, you're now running, 10 to 13 bronzes just right off the bat. So I think that's what he's talking towards. You don't have a ton of flexibility with it. The bronzes aren't amazing as standalones. You have a lot that work with each other, which sort of homogenizes what the decks look like.
Yeah. I mean, you're running Spies, you're running Reveal, or you're running Mill, pretty much. And there's variations on those, but after a week of the community optimizing them, I mean, for the most part, the Nilfgaard Spy deck has changed probably the least out of not the single least, but it's changed not very much compared to a lot of other decks. If you track every deck and every archetype that's seen changes in the past month and a half.
That's fair to say that. I guess Nilfgaard has the most rigid cards in that they're very synergistic, whereas other factions don't have that. They have cards which just generally can fit into a deck, even if you're running a different sort of archetype. Whereas I suppose with most of the reveal cards, barring probably Cynthia, once you start to include them, you're making a reveal deck. Cynthia is the interesting one in that I think you can get away with playing her in any kind of Nilfgaard deck because you're always going to kind of see some sort of value. But then when it comes to the spies, again, you're kind of forced into a position. Whereas, you can run a Francesca hybrid weather movement hand buffing conglomerate in Scoia'tael, and it might work out okay.
Yeah, exactly. Like I just feel like there's potential, Like there's I don't know. There's so many times in metas where there's been like kind of hidden good decks that come onto the scene later, and I just don't see that in Nilfgaard.
See, even that being said, though, so like from a deck building perspective, Nilfgaard, kind of rigid, but from a play perspective, I feel like they're in a decent spot right now.
Yeah.
They're getting the points out that where they need to. They're getting the deck through the deck how they need to. They're doing like, especially spies in particular, is like you see a spies deck. Granted, because of it's a rigid deck, what they're playing, what their end game is, all of what their game plan is. But there's some times where you're just like, okay, I know exactly what you're doing, but there's nothing I can do about it. So even with the rigidity, I still think it's a decent deck. I agree with you though, for sure. Like I think at the beginning of this patch, I was trying to get something weird working with Nilfgaard. I'd have to take a look at my list again, but it was not. I agree. Like it does feel, from a deck building perspective, you just wish there was something in there, but it just doesn't feel like there is right now. But from a play perspective, I feel like they're doing okay.
Yeah. No, they're probably above average right now. Like the Nilfgaard spy decks is pretty competitive.
But then what is average in this situation?
I don't know. Somewhere between Nilfgaard and whatever's under it. Maybe Scoia'tael. I don't know. It's kind of hard to rank things right now. Pretty much right under Nilfgaard.
Yeah, the Scoia'tael movement deck seems about average to me.
Yeah.
If I was going to just throw a baseline out there, it sounds about right.
I think that's fair to say. What about Northern Realms? How do we feel about that now, I guess, versus at the start of the season when you should have played your 100 Northern Realms games?
Yeah.
I've seen Redovid doing okay, but just okay. Like I think leading towards that control archetype. We were talking earlier about how there's two different decks right now that you try and tech against one, you don't really tech as well against the other. And I feel like Northern Realms, especially like a Redovid control, almost has the tools it needs. Depending on your draws, if you can get like half your deck's good against the one and then half your deck's good against the other, but then Redovid kind of fills in for both. Like it's in an okay spot. It's definitely feeling the hurt that it got from the armor nerfs, but I still think that it's doing okay. And I'm hesitant to like call out where it's like, oh no, over nerf needs buffs. Where I think it's more of just a victim of the meta. Like it would be a good deck in a different meta.
Yeah, I actually completely agree.
Yeah, I think almost there is a great way to put it. A lot of times, the versions I've been seeing on the ladder are mostly like the Redovid using or choose art depths, getting the little Blue Mountain whatever commando, the Blue Stripes commando that comes out with it, and they're frosting you, that kind of thing. And the general feeling is, okay, they're starting off well, they're putting some pressure on me, and it feels like I'm always in a slightly losing situation, and I never lose. They just don't have a good way to close it out. I don't really know what the solution is to it. It just feels like it's not quite there yet.
I mean, I'll say my favorite thing going up against Redovid, especially with the weather right now, is winning the coin flip against them and then opening with White Frost. I'm just like, I think I just pass here.
Oh dear. But that's just the player kind of playing weird more than anything, I would say. Like if you're opening with something like weather without any sort of tempo, even if it's Roach, then you're I feel like you're doing it wrong. But you also have Hensel. You have this kind of K20 machine, so with ballistas, field medics, and poor infantry deck that's going around, which is, I think, a little bit of a tricky one to pilot in terms of your sequencing and stuff, but I think it can be quite effective. It's very good. For example, ballistas are really, really good against Dagon Swarm, so then if you're in a strong situation in that matchup, that's kind of half the battle. Because the alternative, you were saying, you can't tech up against both, but you can always tech against one and then maybe have a harder time against the other one, but provided you're winning more games or encountering more games against, say, Dagon than Skellige, for example, you're going to be okay. I haven't played enough of it, the Northern Realms one, to know how it does against Skellige. I've played against it as Swarm, and it's horrific. They just like they just shoot everything. It's like, oh, what's this? You have like 8 wands. Well, now you don't. Good luck with that. So that's a deck that has potential, but it is again a little bit, RNG reliant in terms of your field medics, for example, and Dijkstra. That's another card that it kind of can go very well or very badly. I mean, how do we feel about that sort of Northern Realms deck?
No, Northern Realms has kind of become just like the quintessential high roll faction sometime. I don't know when that happened. Honestly, I feel like Northern Realms is maybe a little bit underrated. I do feel as if there's a lot of potential with cards like Field Medic, like you're saying, and with that kind of Shelfer list.
And I mean, there's also like Cavalry, for example, which are quite good against weather, but then weather is very Dagon at the moment. Skellige doesn't really run any weather whatsoever, so you're kind of teching into kind of a specific matchup. But I guess the question is, if that matchup is common enough, can you get away with running what you would say is a less than top tier deck, but counters one of the top tier decks?
So run a high roll deck and then hope you high roll the matchup.
The ultimate high roll. Yeah, it just depends on what percentage of the various decks you're seeing on ladder, right? On any given day, you could queue into anything. Over a sample size of 300 games, things will really start to show themselves. But it's hard to tech for one particular matchup in a random queue system, and then, well, it just wasn't my day. It's just tough to do with small sample sizes like that.
I guess if you're running the ultimate high roll deck, then you're inevitably going to queue into Petrify, and at that situation you will of course high roll as well as you possibly can, because as far as I'm aware, if you're in a high roll situation against Petrified, all of the cards will align, like the gods will smile upon you, and there'll be salt for days in Australia.
It's I think a good portion of their economy, actually.
Yeah, that's actually how you win as high roll decks. Just queue into Petrify repeatedly, and then you'll be 400-500 MMR in no time. Easy peasy. So Iris, let's talk about Iris.
Iris.
Yeah, I think she's seeing a lot more play now than I think she's ever seen in the last, definitely a long time.
I think that you had it right. No qualifier. She's seen the most play now that she's ever seen.
Ever, yeah. I don't know. I mean, she's pretty easy to fit anywhere. I mean, people have experimented running her in Monsters and Skellige. I think some people are starting to cut her from Monsters. She's pretty good there. Monsters, Skellige, I've seen her in Northern Realms. I've tried her in Squirtle. Yeah, I mean, she really does feel like a true neutral card. If you have a consistent way of killing her, she gets a good amount of surprise value. Honestly, I was personally super surprised that card, got into that state that it did just after that buff. I had predicted that card would have been worse, and that's just, I just misread it.
I mean, she does very well with the Enforcers, because if you get 2 Enforcers out, you can play her and kill her in the same turn.
I mean, I like where Iris is at right now. I like the fact that a card like that's good. That just screams out to me like a good payoff. If I build my deck in a certain way, in certain situations, I'll have an incredibly high payoff value, 25-point bronze, effectively. But that comes with the associated risk of top decking around long rounds, opponents being prepared for it, things like that. I really like the state Iris is in right now. I think she's a really cool card. I don't think she's particularly overpowered or anything. And I like the fact that she's seeing a lot of play right now.
Yeah, I feel like Iris, especially just being neutral, is do you have a spare silver slot in your deck? Go ahead and throw her in there. You'll find some way of killing her. There's just so many ways of, fitting her in and getting the value right now, which is why I think we're seeing her as much as we are. Because her condition to get max value, especially since that change to, I think it's only 5 units, is just so easy to hit now consistently. It's all right, I have 5 things on the board and I can do 3 damage. I get an extra 20 points. Or 25. It's just so easy to get the value off of her now that I think that's why we're seeing her so much.
And the other card that occasionally you see now is Sabrina.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't see Northern Realms very often, but I have seen some Sabrina. It's kind of comes out left field. You don't always expect it, and then boom. Just 3s across the board.
I don't know. The thing about Sabrina is she would actually be good in a different faction. She's in one of the 2 factions in the game that doesn't really have movement tools. If she was in Skellige, Squirtle, or Monsters, she actually might be a little scary. That's a really, really powerful effect, especially after people have cut the counters to that kind of thing. But as it stands, I don't know. I mean, if Northern Realms ever gets like some more tools like that, then Sabrina could actually get pretty scary pretty fast. She's right on the cusp.
I don't know, I feel like you're being a little not scared enough. Like, I think it's one of those things where it's like if Northern Realms gets the tools, that is like the card that everyone's freaking out about, because it's so similar to old Philippa. And it's like that effect is just, if it was in a different faction, if that was in Movement Scoia'tael or Nilfgaard Spies, that would be the spy, the silver card that you just base everything around. And the fact that she's in Northern Realms is just where she's hiding there. Like, she's there, people see her every now and then, just like, wow, that's a really good card. And then they try and play her, and you're playing Northern Realms, so you're just like, oh, wait, never mind. Like, it's... it is an incredibly scary card. So if we see Northern Realms start to get to these kinds of tools, that is going to be what just shoots Northern Realms up the meta snapshot position, I think.
I
feel like go.
The faction it's in is sort of used in this case almost as a balancing factor, right? Yeah. If it was easy to move, that effect is incredibly powerful. You couldn't give that to one of the factions that are much more able to take advantage of it. But the fact that it's so hard to pull off, and it only works with a couple of, maybe you have to play Ard, things like that. I think that's sort of where it is. I agree it does have some scary potential, though. There could be a future world where, we're all fearing Sabrina.
It's kind of like Hailstorm, Hailstorm has been the same for such a long time, and then a certain patch allowed it to really shine, and Sabrina's kind of in that position. She's not so great now, but give it a little bit of time, and potentially it could be ridiculous. And that's the case with, I think, a lot of cards in Gwent. They maybe don't do so well now, but as certain tools maybe move into the game or certain factions get expanded, this is where you're going to see things start to appear. And this is why I think as a deck builder it's worth experimenting, even with cards that a lot of people think are bad, because if you can find a situation where they start to shine, that's when metas start to shift, and that's when certain things can become prominent. And I feel like Sabrina is one of those cards we have to keep an eye on her. Iris, I think she's all right. Like, she's not ridiculous, but people are getting these like 25-point value out of her, but it's a bit more situational. And she's kind of a card that I feel like has come into the meta in a balanced way. She's come into the meta, but she's not ended up being crazy strong, whereas Sabrina is maybe at risk of being ridiculous when her time comes.
Yeah, I mean, that's just the difference with their effects, because Iris just feels very capped, and Sabrina's kind of always going to be awful or terrible. But I couldn't agree more with what you said. I mean, people often fall into the trap of evaluating things based on like a very like linear power system. Like, people get into the habits of thinking about in terms of weak and strong, instead of the more complex, like, situationality that it really exists in, right? Like, there's so many things that would be OP or would be really weak if just a minor tweak happened. And honestly, that's just something that's gonna surprise a lot of people with a lot of cards moving forward.
Well, I think it's just a victim of the fact that we're in this situation where we're like, hey, we're getting like 21 cards coming up pretty soon. We're getting these big meta shifts. We're getting these card influxes. And as that happens, you kind of reevaluate everything, because you look back at everything that's left and you're like, wait a second, this card is really shining now. And Hailstorm's a perfect example of that, because it's like, even if a card is completely unchanged, and actually I think those are the scariest ones whenever a patch comes out, is like, if something is unchanged, see how it works with everything else now, because those things can stand out real quick.
So what you're saying is that they need to make it so Sabrina doesn't target gold cards, and then it will be fine. Like, just do a Hailstorm with her, and
just do it preemptively.
Yeah, basically. So talking about new cards coming out, we've obviously seen Hattori, and then there should be 20 other cards. And last time we got new cards, we saw a lot of bronzes. A couple silvers and a lot of bronzes. Yeah. Do we expect to see more silvers and golds this time, rather than lots of bronzes and a couple silvers? What do people think?
I hope not. I mean, I'd pretty much just like to see bronzes. I think the last batch of bronzes they gave to us, I think it could have been a little bit more skewed towards empowering and creating new archetypes. A lot of them just felt very like a little vanilla-y. But I mean, bronzes really just are kind of the core of the game. They just need to have very interesting effects that are able to combo and synergize.
Joe, what do you think? Sorry, Dale.
I agree. I want to see as many bronzes as possible. Bronzes are the cornerstones of your deck. They're the cards you get to play with 3 of, and bronzes are exactly the type of card, as I believe it was Dale was referencing before, like you can leave cards unchanged and then a new bronze comes and it opens up a new world of possibilities. It can completely tweak and change the power levels of so many other cards besides just the card being printed itself. I think is the cornerstone of decks. Bronzes are just where it's at. The more of those, the better. I think it's just more varied deck building, opening up more factions, more archetypes. I would greatly prefer to see more bronzes.
See, I'm almost in this like mindset because I completely agree with you. Both Soyman and JoeSn0w like wholeheartedly. Like bronzes are what really makes the archetypes. But I disagree with Swim a little bit where he's like the last patch was just kind of vanilla bronzes, and I think it needed to be because we had these archetypes that were there, they were introduced, and they just didn't have anything else to help support them. And we got, these kind of basic bronzes, but they were there to help these archetypes, armor, movement. These were things that we weren't seeing a lot of before. Now it's one of the things that we're talking about a lot lately is that, hey, we have a brand new archetype. So what I'm actually kind of hoping to see from this next patch is still a lot of bronzes, but I want to see a decent amount of silvers and golds that try and introduce some new archetypes. Because that's where I think you need the support. If you want to try and go with an archetype, especially introducing a new one, you need a support from bronzes, silvers, and golds. And if we get a little bit of support from silvers and golds, then we try and make it work with like some bronzes. I think it'd be cool to see what people come up with, and then we maybe get another patch too much down the road, another 20 cards that fleshes out those archetypes a little bit more with a lot of bronzes. And then maybe we move in this alternate cycle of like a bunch of bronzes, one card release, a bunch of silvers and golds, bunch of bronzes.
See, I think that you can't add a whole new archetype in 5 cards. So I don't think that's necessarily something we'll see now. And I also think that gold cards, some factions especially, like they're really lacking in strong gold cards of their own. So, you get to the point where you're either running neutrals or you're running Renew and Royal Decree. And that part of that is also because there's a lack of good gold cards in those factions. The other thing I guess to consider is I think if CD Projekt Red adds more legendary cards, it's going to be better for them in terms of sales because they're more expensive to craft, so people are more likely to buy kegs to try and find them. So there's that side of the coin as well, just from a financial perspective. I don't want to see no golds and silvers. It would be cool if it was like 1 gold, 1 silver, 3 bronzes, for example. That way you're getting predominantly bronzes, but there's also some cool new shinies to play around with. So for me, that's kind of what I would like to see. I don't want to see like 20 new bronzes personally, but I don't want to see 20 new golds either.
Yeah.
Do you think there's a bit of an issue at all, since we're all sort of talking about bronzes being the foundation of decks?
Yeah.
We can use Woodland Spirit as an example, but you can insert X Gold here over the course of time. Do you think there's any fundamental issue with Royal Decree, X Gold, and Renew, where you can almost fundamentally base your entire deck around a gold? Do you think that's, in general, good for the game, or do you think it should mostly stay within the bronzes and gold should be supplementing that strategy and big power boosts?
Probably the latter, if I'm understanding those two right. I feel as if the ability for, pretty much what you're saying is that we have Royal Decree and Renew, and because of that, and because of the high power on those cards, it means that every time there's a gold that's out of balance, you're kind of just going to see that abused. And that's what I would say. And I feel as if it's not a great state for things to be in. I don't know. I personally don't think Royal Decree needed the 2-point buff. Like, the card doesn't really need to be super competitive. Like, it's still going to find places in decks without the 2-point buff, but the 2-point buff just enables this kind of situation a little bit more that, we're saying with just golds being out of line.
I think it depends on how we, as players, want the game to develop, because we have seen it for the longest time where like golds were the cornerstone of the deck. If you didn't draw your golds, you were in a lot worse state. If your opponent drew more of his golds, and it kind of shifted where it's like, hey, we want more consistency with the game, so the bronzes are now the cornerstone of the deck and the golds are there to supplement. But we do still see it every now and then where it's like we get a really good gold and then it's flipped again, and we're going back to that old way of playing. We're saying that the golds are the most important things in the game. I'm willing to sacrifice half of the golds in my deck just to get this strategy working. And I feel like if that's what we want, as players, we want the golds to be these really powerful cards. You can have cards so powerful that you're willing to sacrifice a lot of potential strength just to get this strategy working. Then I think we're in a fine spot. But if we were liking the fact that bronzes were the cornerstone and golds are there to just help things along, and I think Mulligan Scoia'tael is a really great way of a great example of that, especially with the new dragon lady Saskia. Human form. There we go. Where it's a powerful card, but it's more there to help with the rest of the deck. Like, if that's the style that we want, then Renew and Royal Decree are like the two worst offenders to that style of play right now, and they'd have to be changed.
That's honestly, I don't know if I'd necessarily go that far, but I'm honestly leaning towards that camp. Like, I feel as if, I mean, if it's a gold card that, what?
Sorry, just spoilers from chat. And so I forgot that some people care about what 5-year-old
nobody cares.
Yeah. I mean, if it's a gold card that gains its power from like requiring setup or at least requiring like special synergies, then that's totally fine. But if it's just something that it can be it can be played out at any time, just give you a huge amount of value, then it being tutorable, and if it's ever going to be in a position where it's very strong, just lends itself to, did you draw this card? And also just like huge single turn swings, basically the two exact problems we're seeing with Woodland Spirit right now.
Yeah, that's the way I felt for quite some time. It's something I've talked a little bit about in the past. I was just curious what everyone else's thoughts about on that particular issue was. What about you, Jagras? What do you think about that?
I mean, I think that Renew and Royal Decree, they've only seen play once you get these overtuned golds. So long as there's no overtuned golds, they're kind of fine. That's the kind of situation that it's been. Like, Royal Decree didn't really see a lot of play when it was first added, for example, because unless you're a new player, because that was all you had. Because there weren't situations where there was that one gold card that you really wanted to get. Whereas now we have that situation, but that situation doesn't exist in Skellige. It kind of only really exists in Nilfgaard and in monsters to a large degree, a little bit in Scoia'tael, but not so much. And maybe part of that problem is just that there's not that many, similarly powered golds, or the golds are slightly overpowered. Like, either there's one gold that's really good, or there aren't a few golds that are on a similar level, and that's why it sees play. So I don't know if it's necessarily worth changing those cards as opposed to just addressing gold balance, and then maybe we'll have this kind of cyclic effect where, sometimes there's overpowered golds and they see play, and then those golds get nerfed, and then Royal Decree and Renew doesn't see play. If they get nerfed, that's cool. I have premium of both, so like I'm fine with that. I don't really have a strong opinion about these cards.
My issue with that approach is that as soon as we're like, oh, we'll just nerf the golds, and then I guarantee you something will come up again, and we'll be in the same situation where Renew, Royal Decree are the ones getting used to pull this next hypothetical overpowered gold. And for me, I am much more of an attack the source kind of person, where it's like, okay, we're in this situation again that we've seen before. Why are we in it? Because of these two cards. So I'm like, okay, those ones are the ones that need changing. But I can see the arguments for either way. Where it depends on how we as players want the game to develop, I feel.
While we're on the topic of bronzes, silvers, and golds, I actually have a bit of an unpopular opinion. I personally don't really like the bronze, silver, gold system. I feel like so many cards are. I mean, so I've played a lot of card games. I feel like so many cards in the bronze, silver, gold system are so restricted because both silvers and golds are doomed to be one-of slots that it kind of stifles diversity and prevents you from kind of building a deck around so many concepts. It's a problem that we've seen like in closed beta. There's a lot of like silvers and golds that really felt like they should have been made into bronzes, and we've even seen that happen. I mean, for example, Elias kind of turned into Cyclops a little bit. Those cards are very similar, and he became a bronze in a different faction. And we've seen that happen a few times, and it just feels as if even compared to Hearthstone, and don't get me wrong, Hearthstone has plenty of flaws, but one of the things Hearthstone I feel did well was that in the vast majority of cards, just outside of the single legendary category, you're able to run 2 of. So you can build a deck around pretty much anything that comes out. Whereas in Gwent, it feels kind of artificially limited. I feel like diversity would actually be higher if the format allowed more of the higher percentage of designed cards to actually like be able to be properly built around with a deck. I don't know.
I agree with you on the. We definitely see more diversity, but my counter to it is that in games like Hearthstone, where you have the 2 ofs for a lot of stuff, and then the legendaries are the 1 ofs, they also have this extra mana system, and I feel like that's where Gwent is kind of why we have the bronze, silver, gold system.
Oh, yeah, of course.
I mean, it's less of trying to stifle diversity and more of having some cost to have a really powerful effect on a card.
Well, that's absolutely true. But when you contrast that to, say, a game like Yu-Gi-Oh, which basically the entirety of Yu-Gi-Oh, you can see the fact that there's no mana system in Yu-Gi-Oh in pretty much every aspect of its design. Like, the disappearance of a mana system is so tremendously impactful to like the idea of card games. But Yu-Gi-Oh did it in a bit of a different way. They actually managed to have like different costs for cards without really like controlling deck building in that way. Like it feels just so artificially deflated, and I think it's like a large part of the reason why the card pool feels smaller than it should be. There's multiple reasons for that, I guess. I don't know. What do you think, JoeSn0w?
I wonder.
Do you think that there's another way to address this? Maybe with a silver card, for example, that said you may run multiple of this. Or maybe a bronze card that alters by including your deck. Maybe it's underpowered, but it allows you to run an extra copy of a silver. Do you think there's any other way to sort of artificially get around this barrier just by the wording and the text boxes on cards? Or do you think it's just strictly a fundamental issue and that this is the system that we're working in, so this is sort of how it is?
I would say the former. I do think that it's a bit of a fundamental issue, and I honestly don't necessarily like it from a design point, but cards like Baron, cards like Royal Decree are basically my go-tos. Cards that increase your reliability of getting key cards that you might need for a strategy, like Royal Decree. Like if something was able to tutor silvers in a similar way, not necessarily the same way, but in a similar way. Or a card like Baron, which is a card you build a strategy around that actually puts itself in your hand at a certain point in time. Those kinds of concepts. And I'm not saying like, I'm sure a lot of people are, often freaking out because those are like scary things. I'm not saying like all sorts of finishers should always be in your hand, but those kinds of concepts should be kind of explored more, I would definitely say.
I completely agree. I think it's that's some really good design space. Baron's one of my favorite cards. I haven't gotten to play a lot of it recently because I don't think it's particularly good right now. But Baron, when I first saw the change, I immediately started building decks with it. I was doing very well for a while. This was a couple of patches back. I do think that we could have greater diversity if they're they just smashed it to pieces, did away with the gold, silver, bronze system. It would present its own forms of problems because you do need other ways to balance cards without a mana system. I basically think a lot of good points have been brought up. So it is sort of holding back diversity, but I think there are ways you can get around that with more cards, with more text boxes, right? Do we have any cards that's text box influences the way we build decks yet? I don't think so. I can't think of any.
There's not enough. I mean, something like Ceres. Ceres is even another example of what I mean. Like, because she combos with Bran and because she's something you build your deck around. It's just like, I don't know, like silvers and golds aren't a fundamental limitation necessarily, but they kind of feel like it from the current card pool.
I don't know. I think like gold and silver do a good job at balancing the game to a certain extent because you don't really want a situation with gold star cards. We can have 3 woodland spirits, for example. Like, we realize that's like kind of ludicrous, but there has to be a way of limiting cards, but then also having kind of fun power cards, and gold and silver kind of allows us to do that. Gold's because you only get 4 of them, and then silvers, there are situations like Sigurdrifa where she only targets silvers or bronzes, so that then allows for gold cards to be a little bit more powerful and to stop the replayability. Renew is then the issue because that's giving them replayability, but that does take up one of your gold slots. And I personally don't think that it's bad design. Like, I think it allows for CD Projekt Red to do creative things without it being hugely damaging to the game. And if you took that away, I think you're saying that that would give you more diversity, but I'm not 100% sure that it would.
It's less about taking it away and more about replacing it. Like Yu-Gi-Oh is kind of the easiest example. Like Yu-Gi-Oh has so many. Well, it's just that it has so many different ways to like have summoning costs to things and special conditions to getting things out. Like literally so many different ways. And it feels like that is maybe a better system. It just doesn't actually. It doesn't hurt deck building in the same way that the bronze, silver, gold system does. That's all. Obviously, what the bronze, silver, gold system accomplishes is very important because it allows like big swing effects and like, you know, unique mechanics to happen without like, you know, allowing you to, as you say, run 3 woodland spirits. But I feel like that impact could be accomplished in maybe a better way.
See, and I'm worried that we're just like, I don't know, there's a lot of stuff that feels fundamental to Gwent that needed to get changed, going from the single-player version in The Witcher 3 to the multiplayer version. But I'm not sure if the bronze, silver, gold system is it. Like, it just feels like one of the things that is like, no matter what, I think that if we continue with the current way of playing Gwent, you know, draw 10 cards, lots of cards starting hand, only 25 card minimum decks, no mana costs. You need something there to limit it, and I feel like the bronze, silver, gold system maybe doesn't need to get thrown out, but I could like seeing some new tweaks to it because it's one of those things that feels so fundamentally Gwent that as soon as that gets changed, then it's not Gwent anymore to me.
Fair enough. We should talk about tournaments now.
We should.
Otherwise, we'll be here all night. So we've got GwentSlam #2 Electric Boogaloo happening at the end of the month at the Life Coach Mansion. So I believe the format is Freddie, because he won the first one, he automatically is invited. And they have 1 invitee spot this time, not 3, there's just 1. And then, what was I going to say? And then there's like top 3 from Pro Ladder, and then 3 that you can qualify through some kind of tournament, right? That's I think how it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's 2 tournaments this weekend. The one on Saturday, both of the finalists, I believe, qualify. And on Sunday, I think it's only the winner. I think that's how the 3 slots are being divvied up.
Okay, so are you going for it, JoeSn0w? You gonna move like flight to Vienna and have a party in the bull pit?
Oh yeah, I'm only playing the Saturday one. No point in registering for Sunday when I'm just gonna win Saturday, right?
Saturday, I believe it's top 2, right? Like if you come first or second to get in, so it's a better time. It's a better time to be competing than maybe on the Sunday.
I'm gonna give it a shot. I feel confident in the decks I'm gonna bring. I have a pretty good grasp of the format right now. You know, it is what it is, single elimination, right? The best player in the world can get beat 10 times. You know, it's rough. Single elimination tournaments are tough. The winner is going to be a very good player, as we've seen in the last couple with Panda and Freddie winning. You're not going to skate through by not being an elite player. It's tough. Single elimination is a really, really long and tough format to play in.
No, I'm looking forward to just seeing more tournaments, period. Like GwentSlam #2 is going to be great to watch, I think, no matter who is actually in it. If the first one's any indication to go by. So I'm looking forward to it. I'm wishing you the best of luck, JoeSn0w. I'm wishing Freddie the best of luck in GwentSlam 2 as well. And speaking of tournaments, I do just want to go ahead and mention out there real quick that we don't have a exact date for you yet, but please stay tuned for TGO October updates. We will have those out for you sometime soon, hopefully. Soon TM.
It's always soon TM. Always soon TM.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's so hard.
Soon Circle R.
Because if you commit to a date, and then it's, you know, everyone's always asking, because you can never be wrong, you know. You just get bombarded with, you know, people that are just unsatisfied because you told them the wrong date.
It makes sense, and we also need to schedule these things around, you know, other events. Like you don't want to clash with GwentSlam, for example, and then we have the end of the season, and these are the kind of things that you need to deal with. But I think GwentSlam 2 will be really fun. They've invited 4 casters this time, so, you know, McBeard and Maguire are going to get a break. I think Panda and Merchant are going along, I believe. So I think it'll be a good event. I think we're going to see things improve in terms of production value and that side of things. And it's always fun to see some, you know, high tier Gwent, do we think we'll see Mill?
I hope not.
I like seeing Mill. I don't know. That was my favorite prediction. That I think last time, where I was like, "Hey, Mill's like decent," and Swim's just like, "No, it's not going to see play." And then I don't know. I like that deck, and I wouldn't mind seeing it. Although I know it's long games, but I don't know. I like it from. I like
really
the longer
long
games. It lets the casters really get into it.
Yeah, I honestly say that's the test of a good caster. Like, it's less about like showing them. You show them a mill game. If they can make a mill game interesting, they're a good caster.
Or 3 back-to-back, which was the case last time with Panda. I was just like, yeah, who wants to win with Mill? Like, then people will play it on the ladder. I'll just lose with it 3 times and enjoy the cast. I mean, at least there wasn't like a disconnect in that situation, like happened with the Swim Freddy 6-game epic. So hopefully we won't see those things happen. So I guess the last thing to wrap up with is questions. So if anyone has any questions for JoeSn0w or anyone else here, at Gwentlemen in the chat. And while we do that, I guess JoeSn0w, this is your chance for shameless self-promotion. You can tell people all about your Twitter, for example.
My Twitter, yeah. We're still working on the Twitter situation.
I heard about this.
Yeah, I promise we'll get there at some point. I just never had the need for a Twitter before. I don't know. We're working on it. Twitter is coming soon. But if you want to stop by, check out my stream, Twitch TV/JoeSn0w. The O in Snow is a 0. Stop by, hang out. Feel free to ask me any questions. I usually keep a pretty interactive stream going on. Talk to the chat, answer questions, take a look at decks, things like that. Yeah, stop by, come check it out. My YouTube is linked through there, and soon my Twitter will be as well. I got to get there at some point.
You got it. Twitter's where the cool kids hang out, and also me. Right, let's have a look at these questions. If you see any that you want to answer, enjoy. Don't knock yourself out, but answer the questions. Let's see. What have we got in here?
I will say, Joe, I always enjoy having another streamer who it's like, yeah, it's JoeSn0w, but it's spelled weird, so good luck actually finding it.
I like how you can't even say JoeSn0w, but the O is a 0 because you got 2 of them.
Yeah, exactly.
And one of them is a 0.
It's tough. Look, it wasn't the...
Yeah, coming from someone who spelled wolf with a PH, I appreciate that I'm not alone in this.
I guess at least I had the good sense that it wasn't just a random string of digits, right? It's at least pronounceable.
Yeah.
So we bring us, when do we think the positioning update will be? Because CDPR have said that they have added agility to units, I guess, because they have some kind of preemptive plan for some big update.
Yeah.
And we're asked when we think that will be. Do we think it'll be before or after Thronebreaker? Assuming Thronebreaker is, I guess, end of the year. That's when we'll assume. Any guesses?
Before.
Oh.
I'm going to guess.
Anyone want to go after?
I'm going to go after just because, again, anytime I work with software, it's like, hey, we'll have it by this date. Maybe. So I'm gonna give CDPR some breathing room and say after.
What about during? What if some of the mechanics in the Thronebreaker single player are based on the new positioning and all of that? Maybe they're designing it with that in mind?
That's a really clever way to look at it, because if they had this whole new single player campaign, and then just I'm a campaign. No, if they had this whole new single player campaign and then completely changed how the game works instead of in terms of positioning or whatever it is that they have planned, that wouldn't make a lot of sense, because that completely messes over all the single player content that they've added. So I guess they have to add it either before or at the same time, and Dale is wrong. Logically speaking.
Well, as long as they figured that out.
Oh, I never really thought about it though. I'm excited.
There's one from Mythic Pilot of, should Warcry change to become the Skellige Weather Clear and have the ability to boost 1 damage unit by half its power?
That would be kind of fitting, actually. I don't mind that.
I like it from the idea of the guy shouting is the one who's clearing the weather away. He's like, stop raining!
I think the only problem with that suggestion is that Warcrier is kind of and it's never really been brought to fruition, but Warcrier is supposed to be an empowerer of an entire archetype. I feel like people often forget, but the CDPR has tried to force a damaged Warcry buff, like a damaged unit, self-damage archetype. And by reducing him in that way, it kind of hurts the ability for that archetype to finally come to fruition. It's awesome play in Challenger meta, actually.
Yeah, there was one meta where it was, doing reasonably well. It was a fairly power deck. You're right? It should be the empowerment of that archetype, particularly if it's something they're looking to build on. Otherwise, I do really like the idea, though. You're going to have your damaged unit because it's in the weather, goes together nicely. We're starting to see things like Archgriffin have weather clear plus another additional effect attached onto it. Whether doubling something's power from that point is too good, I don't know. But it's not crazy. Sounds all right to me.
I kind of can see both sides. Like, it would work, but Warcry, like you say, is meant to be this kind of self-harm archetype. That's why you have these units that like buff and then damage themselves, like Jengay, for example. It's designed to synergize with that and have a situation where harming yourself equates to a lot of points. I mean, that we did have the issue where with Axeman, harming yourself buffed your Axeman, so then you could just do all sorts of crazy stuff back in the day. So it's an interesting one, but I don't know. I think it maybe makes sense to have your own card that has an effect that's useful out with a specific archetype. Because if you look at like Nausicaa Brigade, for example, it boosts a unit by 3. That's usually going to be useful. You look at the Scoia'tael one, it moves a unit. That's generally also going to be a useful effect. It's more universal, whereas I feel like this buffing a damaged unit is a little bit more niche. Although I guess we do have your opponent damaging your units, but then if your opponent doesn't damage your units, then you have no effect. Elias von Twitch asks, "Can Joe call us all idiots, please, or morons?" His choice. I'm not sure if that's a she wants everyone to be an idiot or just her, or what she's going with there. But knock yourself out. Have fun.
You in particular are an idiot. You got that one out of me, all right? One of the things I say now, Elias is awesome. Generally, I refer to a lot of cards, particularly ones that don't have any special abilities, as idiots. It's sort of my generic term. So any of my viewers just hear it out of me quite a lot. I think that's what Elias is going for there.
Oh man, you could also go with like numpty. That's a Scottish one, or you could go pillock. There's a British one. Oh man, they're all pillocks. Like that's a great word. You got to improve your vocabulary, Joe. Like,
I'm down to that one language thing again.
What even is the German for idiot? Dale, help us.
I don't.
I don't know. Right. Any more questions? New faction. When do we think there'll be a new faction?
I think it's probably going to be after. I think they said it's going to be after Thronebreaker, right? Like they said that they're working on what is coming after. What I think would be really cool, because I know it's been talked about a lot, is that what is the new faction? They've confirmed that there is one at some point in the future being worked on, but what is it? And I think they've already shut down a couple of things. Like I think people were saying, "Oh, Tuason." They're like, "No, it's part of Nilfgaard. Like it's not going to happen." I don't know. Like what I think would be really cool is, especially since they're expanding on, like they've said that they're doing more lore with Thronebreaker that they're adding onto, is having something be introduced or like hinted at in the Thronebreaker campaign and have that be the new faction going forward. So I don't know. I'd like it just because it'd be more things to look forward to with Thronebreaker.
I'm gonna say summer 2018. You heard it here first. Yeah, I don't think it'll be that soon.
Oh.
For the new faction, you think it'll be earlier than that?
I'm not gonna guess.
That way you're not wrong.
I just think summer feels a little late.
When was Nilfgaard? Nilfgaard was what? Spring.
Spring.
So then if it was spring, it would be a year after. I think it's going to be peasants. I'm going to put my money on the peasant faction. There's going to be an uprising. It's going to be fantastic.
There's no silvers or golds in the entire faction.
That's fine. You can run like just loads of bronzes. Swim will be happy. Think of all the diversity. You can run 9 different cards in that deck.
I mean, I think summer sounds pretty reasonable to me as well. Honestly, I think there's a lot of room within the factions to go. June. Right? Like you could add more leaders. There's the cards that are already coming out. I mean, I think there's a lot of room to grow without necessarily needing to add a 6th faction. And that's a ton of additional complication. I don't know. I would think it'd probably be later rather than sooner is my guess.
I mean, it depends what they're prioritizing. So we have Thronebreaker. We say that's the end of the year. And then, you know, a lot of people are wanting like a new, and bear in mind that we have seasons of 2 months. So then a lot of people are wanting a new game mode. Do I think that they'll prioritize a new game mode over a new faction? I would say that seems sensible personally. But then, you know, I guess that's from a streamer/content creator viewpoint. Maybe they think that new factions will bring in more people. And like Joe said, you know, they want to maybe flesh out leaders. I think they've said they wanted, 5 leaders per faction? I feel like I've heard that somewhere before. That so then if they do, you know, if they do that beforehand, that's going to, you know, flesh out the game quite a lot. We've also got our positioning changes. Like, bear in mind, it's coming up for the end of October. I think, like, that's me saying it'll come out in the next 8 months. Like, in about 8 months' time, which is summer. Maybe it'll be sooner. Maybe it'll be closer to like 6. But
I'm just waiting for the announcement tomorrow. Just prove us all wrong.
I think that's fair to say.
Well, I'm not really seeing any more viewer questions. I know we're already 15 minutes over what we normally go with. We just had a lot to talk about today. But that's never a bad thing, is it?
Sorry.
Oh.
I was going to say it's because Joe's such a great guest.
Oh, thank you. Sorry, and then I cut you off again.
I know. Stand corrected.
I was going to say, if we had time for one more quick question, I saw an interesting suggestion from Arthur Huxaki. He was asking about a type of card that you play that's maybe a little bit overstated or very powerful, but then if it gets destroyed, the opponent gets some sort of reward. Almost like a treasure chest type of card. What do you guys think about something like that?
Like Moat Lurker.
Yes, something like Moat Lurker. That could be, or, I don't know, maybe a 15 strength unit that has some way to destroy it. If you meet this condition, you get to weather the road that it was in or something. Something, I don't know, anything like that. That you're playing something with an inherent risk, and if it gets destroyed, then, you know, your opponent gets rewarded.
It's great design space. I would be shocked if they weren't eventually going to do something like this.
Yeah, I really like that idea. I think it's just, I feel like we have to be careful about what the reward is, because Gwent is being so unlike other card games where you can't just be like, oh, this is overstated, but you destroy it, you gain life. Like there's no life. You draw a card. Sure. I don't want to do that. I'm already thinning my deck out. Like it'll depend on what the reward is, but I really do agree with someone. It's great design space. So
like strong units, and if you kill them, something bad happens to you. So doesn't that just buff control?
One of the problems, though, is that because in Gwent, health and strength are the same thing. Some people in chat are saying that my analogy of Moat Lurker is wrong and it's more like the beast. That's true, but because in Gwent, strength and health are the same thing, if you make the card like overstated and make it killable, it kind of has to be at least like a 15, and then it's pretty much only dying to instant kill effects, which don't really feel great because then it's just like you either have the effect or you don't, right? It's less about killing it and more about having a specific answer, right? So I feel like it would exist with a powerful deployability, rather. More like Moat Lurker. Because
Esco just kills things, right? Like in the current state of Gwent, you can have something there. If it died, it would be great because it's just like, well, we'll just run Esco, and then and then hand buffing decks would obviously become like OP because then they could counter the Esco or whatever. Like, it's an interesting idea. I think, like you said, it's cool design space, and it's something that maybe. I think it would be difficult to implement, but it's definitely something that could be explored.
He just described Iris coming from chat.
Well, no, Iris is the opposite. That's a card that you want to kill. We're
talking about the payoffs up front, and if it gets killed, something goes wrong.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Does sense. King Bran need a nerf? He seems to be the root of all Skellige's problems. Yes, King Bran is probably the strongest leader in the game. If you want the short answer. The long answer is that, yeah, he should be nerfed, but other Skellige cards should be brought up to compensate. Honestly, like that might sound silly because I'm sure everyone's sick of Skellige right now, but if Bran gets nerfed, like Skellige as we know it literally disintegrates.
I would say the thing with Skellige is like, Skellige decks which do well are always really, really consistent because Skellige, it's quite easy to be consistent because you can just throw your cards in your graveyard and gain benefits from that. And Bran is kind of one of those issues because he gives you consistency in what's in your graveyard. And because you have so much graveyard play in Skellige, what that means is you're in a very safe position because you don't have to be like, oh, well, what if I don't end up with this card in my graveyard? Because it's kind of guaranteed with Bran because you can target this card. And that's why, Graveyard Grief is so strong against Skellige because they have so much graveyard play, and because they have graveyard play, they're more consistent because you can discard things, and you have things like what they call raiders, where you discard them and they resurrect. So then it's not even costly for you to be putting cards into your graveyard, and that's why when they are strong, it's always the discard archetypes that seem to be that way. So I guess King Bran is maybe part of the problem for sure, but I think part of it's just that's the archetype.
But when you Bryn, Morkvarg, Olgierd, and Ceres, you're getting literally 30 points distributed across 3 rounds, which is kind of insanely powerful. And of course, that's with carryover that prevents the opponent from being able to drive pass as well. Like, the numbers are just kind of insane. Skellige's kind of been held back by its supplementary tools, and Restore coming onto the scene just like kind of, I guess, showed how strong Bran is, I think. But maybe that's just me.
And besides just the raw amount of points you're getting with the carryover, it's the consistency that Jagras is talking about, right? I mean, every single game you get to see the exact cards that you want. It's a very, very high power level. There's a reason he has 2 strength right now, right? Like, they obviously knew that this was a super powerful effect. Is he the leader with the lowest strength? I believe so.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, it's just a super powerful effect. And it's really hard to particularly balance. And if you did change it, I think Swim's absolutely right that you'd have to change a lot in the rest of the faction to compensate, because that's sort of what Skellige's just banking on right now.
We are so over time. Okay, guys. Well, I think we'll leave it there. Thank you so much to Joe, who will eventually have Twitter, for coming on the show. It's been lovely to have you.
I promise. Thank you guys so much for having me. I had a blast.
Thank you for Dale, who has frames for once.
No. I think, chat, we didn't have enough last week, but throughout the week, we did manage to get enough meteorite power, so Premium Dale is here.
And obviously to my lovely brother, Swim. Apparently we're related now. So, why didn't you get me a birthday present? I'm really offended, but, beyond that. Any shout-outs, anybody? Joe, you want to shout anyone out?
I'm good.
Not the idiots?
Yeah, shout out to all the idiots, which are basically like Blue Stripes Commandos. Any unit they throw on the board and doesn't do anything. Shout out to all of them.
Swim, you have any shout-outs?
Yeah, I'd like to give a shout-out to Twitch chat. They always get me through my hardest of times.
You stole my shout out. You're so rude.
Yeah, I know, right?
Fucking brothers, man.
I had to get it before you did.
As always, I like shouting out the communities. The Gwent.reddit.com. From there, you can check out the official Gwent Discord. You can also check out the Ask Gwent Discord, which is just really helpful for new players, where you just ask a question, you get an answer. It's just I love shouting out the communities, because if you're trying to get into Gwent, or if you're already into Gwent, you just want to keep up. But one of the best aspects of Gwent is the community. So I highly encourage people to check them out and get themselves involved, and it's a good place.
Sounds good. And I'm gonna shout out Crokies, my Scottish brethren. Like, between me and him, we're carrying Scottish brother. Gwent. Well, you're my actual brother. Crokies is like my, what's the word? I'm trying to think how to explain it. We come from the same place. We're not actually brothers. We're like bros. You and me are like siblings, and me and Crokies are like. Well, Scottish people wouldn't even say bros. You'd say like mates or whatever. Anyway, point being, shout out to Crokies if you're in chat. Hi. That's my shout. I'm going to shout out one specific person for once. And that's how it's going to be from now on. So, tune in next week. Maybe it'll be you, whoever you are. Maybe I'll shout you out. And now we wave vocally at camera and say bye. Bye.